Hello, my name is Nathan Agpan, host of the Addicted to Purpose podcast. In this video is actually a preview episode of the Addicted to Purpose podcast that was shot about 2 years ago. Now, the podcast project had to be shelved due to other pressing projects, but now it is back on. This particular episode is a conversation you need to listen to. It features me and my friend, Minister Extraordinaire, Mr. Piet Van Waarde, speaking about purpose. As will be the case with other Addicted to Purpose episodes, we're going to be interviewing these individuals who are really passionate about what they do and addicted to their purpose, and asking them, how did you get here? What does purpose mean to you? What does what you do mean to the rest of the world? And then drilling into their minds to get some golden nuggets for you. And we do that in this episode. In this episode, Piet talks about how he found the ministry, which is his purpose. Very interesting, by the way. I mean, it's probably one of the best that I've heard so far. And the struggles along the way. This is an episode to listen to, and I am not fluffing it because I mean, every time I hear it, I'm like, wow, this was good. So I invite you to listen to this. But as you listen to it, I also want you to think of other individuals that you may know who are addicted to their purpose, who are passionate about what they do, whose stories will serve to inspire other people so they can be addicted to their purpose. These are the individuals that we wish to highlight on this podcast. And if you know any of those individuals, please feel free to leave a comment, a recommendation as to who they are, and we will get in contact with them to see if we can make it happen. Now, before we go into that, I didn't read Piet's bio in the podcast episode, so I'm going to kind of give you a quick idea of who he is so you kind of are ahead of that. Piet has a master's degree in theology and business administration. He served as the lead pastor at Woodcrest Chapel. That's a large church here in the Midwest, and he led a team whose objective was to reimagine the way church was done, doing church in a new way. And with that particular outreach, they were able to reach thousands of people in the Midwest. Now, he has taught in the UK in theological schools. He has led pastors, conferences, leadership academies, team building academies. He started his own consulting company called Sidewalk, which serves businesses and nonprofits with the goal of helping them achieve greater levels of organizational effectiveness. Now, I will tell you, with all of that being said, it pales in comparison to the quality of the individual himself. Piet is a wonderful person, and he was so wonderful that I actually personally approached him to get to know him more. And this is how this partnership and the chemistry that you will see between us actually came about, because he is genuinely a great, great person. Now, without further ado, I welcome you to the Addicted to Purpose episode. Our newer episodes are going to be a lot more nicer than this one as far as technology goes, but the quality is nonetheless, the ideas are nonetheless worth listening to. So I look forward to having you here. If you enjoy what you see, subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on the future videos, but also leave a comment. Let us know what you think. And, if you have any of the topics that you want to listen to specifically, you can make that recommendation. Now, be the best you can be. Let's get it going. Thank you. God bless. Cheers. Welcome to the Addicted to Purpose podcast. My name is Nathan Agpan. I have the privilege of being your host of this show. And today I have a special guest, Mr. Piet Van Waarde, with me. But before that, the Addicted to Purpose podcast is specifically designed to celebrate people who, of course, as the name implies, are addicted to their purpose. On this show, I will have people who are doing things that I admire, and also who can maybe share insights with anyone who listens in. On some episodes of the podcast will be pure teaching, but today I have a rock star.
Oh, man. You said you weren't going to do that. You were going to keep the expectations low.
A global traveler, my friend, Mr. P. Van Ward here with us. And Pete, I mean, I would love to say it's an honor to have you. It is an honor to have you.
Well, thank you.
I know I have you more than once, but of course, for the podcast, it is your first time. So how the heck are you, man?
I'm doing good. I'm honored to be here, actually.
Thank you.
I have a lot of respect for you and what you're doing. And so to be here means a lot to me as well.
Thank you. Absolutely.
And that's about as serious as I'm going to get for the whole podcast.
I know. Always have fun with you. You know, the funny thing is that, you know, I envision podcasts with other people, you know, kind of being more straightforward, clear cut. But this one is definitely not going to be, because I don't think it's possible for us not to goof around. But I think that's just the beauty of it. So
I agree.
Well, Pete, you know, a lot of people are going to be hearing this podcast who may not have seen you and I on like a Facebook Live or an Instagram Live. So let's begin with, please, kind of giving us an idea, who is Piet Van Ward? I mean, it's so unfortunate someone would not know you, but
oh, come on now. I'll start at the beginning. My family immigrated to the States when I was young. My dad worked for a Dutch company, and so we moved to New York City. He worked in Manhattan, so I grew up on the East Coast. And then I came to the Midwest to do some work in ministry, did ministry here for about 23 years. And now I am on my own. I'm doing a little speaking. I have a villa that my wife and I are hosts in Pella, Iowa.
Nice.
So, like, if anybody needs to kind of find their purpose, it's a great place to kind of retreat to and kind of figure out what your life is about. So that's part of what I'm really excited about doing in this next season of my life, is just kind of hanging out there and trying to be of help to people.
Nice. I've seen photos, of course. I mean, it seems like a very beautiful place, and I will end up there.
Yes,
one of these days.
Because I am doing a podcast there called Voices from the Villa.
Nice.
And so, yeah.
Sounds like a ghost hunting.
Yeah, my wife doesn't like the name very much. She's like, don't kind of promote that part of the legend at that house.
That's funny. But I know just kind of seeing the architecture, it's a really beautiful place. But what I want to do is let's kind of go way back, because I know you kind of glossed, kind of summarized and condensed the whole journey, which was very good. Was a very good job. But I want you to, I know because in the past we have spoken very briefly. You remember when we did that call and you spoke about how you started and the Piet back then and the Piet now. So maybe kind of give me a little bit of an idea of who was Piet as a young man.
Well, I grew up as the oldest of 5 kids. As I said, my parents were both Dutch. And so I think our growing up years were pretty, I would say, formal and strict. So the Dutch way is we are about rules. We're about, doing things right as a family. So we were regular about church. We were regular about making sure that everything looked right and was right. But on the inside, our family was kind of going through some rough times. My mom was a POW in World War II, so she always wrestled with depression. And during my high school years, she was actually institutionalized for a while. And so that had a pretty significant effect on our family. It was not something that I dealt with personally very easily. So I kind of fell into the drug culture as a way to both kind of run from my rule-intensive past, but also to kind of help myself escape from some of the challenges that we were growing up with. So I was really a lost kid in many ways growing up. And then I had a conversion experience where I discovered who Christ was in a more personal way in my life, and that was life-transforming. And that ended up putting me on a trajectory of ministry. So I was in ministry for 35 years after that. And I think that my growing up years sensitized me to the challenges that people face that are not always seen. So, and I'm sure that as you coach people, as you work with people, you see the same thing. They may look all together on the outside, but there's stuff on the inside that's keeping them from being successful. And so part of that answer for me was through finding Christ, but it's a lot larger than that too. You still have to figure out who you are and what you want to do and how you understand your calling, so to speak, or find your purpose. And so for me, that was about speaking and communicating, and hopefully I've been helpful over those 35 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's very unique, and I think that's just the beautiful thing about it is that a person might end up at a familiar destination, preacher, coach, teacher, consultant, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But that journey to that destination often follows a very unique and distinct route. Yeah. That's just very, very unique. So how many siblings did you have growing up?
So I'm the oldest of 5 kids. So we had 4 boys, and then my sister was the youngest. And then we had a 6th child that died 2 weeks after he was born. And that really was the kind of tipping point for my mom after she lost her 6th child. That's really when things went south. And because she never dealt with the pain of the war years, she kind of carried that inside. And then when she lost her child, then all that stuff kind of came to the surface, and she couldn't find herself out of that depression. Now, the good news is that after 7 years of wrestling with that, a big piece of it being forgiveness of those who had wronged her, she now is a person who can speak to that and be of help to other people who are struggling similarly with that kind of depression.
Wow.
So God even redeemed that part of her story.
That's phenomenal. That is phenomenal. I mean, it's a whole different conversation about, repressed feelings and everything. And, I know you remember we did a thing about, the ABCs of waywardness.
Yeah,
and
right.
That whole apathy and bitterness. And those emotions are definitely, even a failure to express those emotions. And I think we'd spoken about that. Sometimes you just kind of want to express it and deal with it and move on. And I understand being, a prisoner of war and all of those things are just really hard, but repressed emotions, it's not a very good thing, is it?
No. And I think that a lot of people have those kinds of pains in their past. I mean, you say POW and you're right away like, wow, that's significant. But sometimes even the not so quote unquote significant challenges of growing up, whether you were like overweight or whether you had a funny name or some other quote unquote not so big challenge, if you don't really process that can have an effect on how you see yourself and whether or not you're successful. And so I think one of the lessons I learned coming out of that experience is that not dealing with your emotions in a healthy way is going to be an impediment to your fulfilling the purpose God has for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So being the oldest of, 5 kids, or you had siblings, I believe looking up to you, how were you able to cope with waywardness?
I didn't. I escaped, unfortunately, and I carry some regret about that actually. And I've often heard people talk about an existential debt, where you feel like because of mistakes that you made, you're like motivated in a way to help people to kind of compensate for the things that you failed to do earlier in your life. And that, if you're aware of it, that can be a healthy thing. But if you're not aware, if you haven't processed that, then you can go to the other extreme, become a workaholic. You can bear too many problems of other people because you haven't dealt with the feeling of regret about your past. And so awareness of what's happening inside. And we talk about this all the time. Every time we get together, we end up going to that place of, okay, so what are you thinking? What are you believing, and how does those thoughts and beliefs affect your behavior? Because that behavior is going to take you to a place either that you want to go or you don't want to go.
Right.
And so if you want to change your behavior, you have to go all the way back to some of those fundamental thoughts and beliefs that you carry.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. Now, my question is, how did you end up, how did your faith begin? Okay, this wayward guy, I'm pretty sure he was a smooth talker, so you had the ladies. How did you end up being so captivated by, the truth? And then let's just start. How did it happen?
Well, part of the story is that I was on a bad LSD trip. And I was at a party. It was at my house.
It's not that bad if you ended up finding Christ.
No, I'm almost a little embarrassed to say it, but we're gonna go all the way there. So there was a party at my house, and it was one of those deals where I had invited a few friends over, but then they said, "Hey, Pete's having a party at his house," and there's probably about 30 people in this one bed,
wow.
like what we have here, right?
Really?
And they were all bringing their dope and their beer, and that totally trashed the place. So 1:00 in the morning, I'm coming down off LSD, and there's a friend sitting next to me, and he thought this was awesome. He thought this was the best thing ever. And he looks at me and he said, "Pete, we're always going to live like this." And he meant that as a good thing. And I don't if you've ever experimented with drugs, but LSD is it's not just hallucinogenic, it messes with your head. And so what he said is, we're always going to live like this, and that echoed in my brain. We're always going to live like this. We're always going to live like this. And there was something inside of me that said, "No. This is not how I wanted to live the rest of my life." And I think God used that bad trip to start me on a search. So if I'm not living like this, how am I going to live?
Right.
And it just so happened that I met some people that reflected Christianity in a way that was different than the rule-intensive way I grew up. And I all of a sudden said, well, maybe there's something more to this than I ever considered. And so I was very much in search mode. And they started to say some things that made sense to me, and probably within a few weeks of that experience, I was driving down a peninsula and Long Island Sound. I grew up, like I said, on the East Coast, and so I was right on the Long Island Sound. And there was this peninsula that went out into the water. There was a lighthouse at the end. And I know you can't make this stuff up, right? But there was a lighthouse at the end. So I'm driving towards the lighthouse. I'm driving towards the light. And on one side of the car was this parking lot full of all these people sitting on the hoods of their cars, drinking beer, smoking joints. And that's where I used to party. And I was going back to that familiar place because I didn't know where else to go. So I'm driving to this lighthouse, and I have this epiphany, because on the other side of the car is this beautiful scene with the sun coming down on the water and the water lapping up on the beach and seagulls. And it was as God used that scene to speak to me, to say, "Pete, this is all you got. This is your life." And then I looked at the other side, and it was as God said, "This is what I do. Wouldn't you rather have what I have to offer?" And I got to the lighthouse, and instead of turning right, I turned left, and I went back home, and I gave my life to God that night. And I was like, I want what you have. I'm tired of this life. I'm tired of the old life. I want this. And that began the journey.
Wow. I swear you made that up.
No, I'm totally serious.
That is awesome. That's phenomenal. That sounds really, really good. I can see the emotion in your face, so I know it's real. I was putting you through my lie detector, and you passed. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. So here you are, black sheep of the family.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, this, guy who has had an awakening. How did that go with your family?
Well, through the experience that my mom had, my dad lost his faith. And so I'm not sure what he thought originally, because my finding God was also my call to ministry, as best I understand it. Because I thought, if this can change a life like mine, why would I not want to do this for the rest of my life? to tell people that this is true. So I think at first he thought, Pete, pastors, they never make any money. They're having to listen to everybody's problems. Are you sure you want to do this? So he was pretty, not excited for me. My mom, on the other hand, because she was going through her own healing process, was like, yes, finally, he's seen the light. And I'm sure she wished I saw it in another way, through the things that she had experienced, but I had to find my own way. And so she was helpful in kind of trying to help me navigate some things. I actually got involved with a cult for a while that was not really good, because I went from total drug addict to Jesus freak.
I know.
I mean, it was just crazy. So I got involved with this group, and she was all worried about me, and I finally kind of got things sorted, and went to school to study communications, because I felt like if I was going to talk, I better learn how to talk. So I joined a debate team and started learning how to communicate, and then went to seminary. And then I went to business school, because I figured if you're going to learn how to run an organization, you better learn how to manage people and money. And so I kind of went through the whole educational track for a while, and then I started serving at church.
Wow. That's phenomenal. So your dad came to terms with it eventually?
Yeah, I have a funny story. So about 10 years into ministry, I was really discouraged. I was in a church that was not doing very well, and I felt like I was a square peg in a round hole. I was living in a repossessed mobile home. I had 2 kids. My 5-year-old son, my oldest son, learned how to use the F-bomb and smoke cigarettes in this trailer park.
Oh, wow.
And
the
I'm
pastor's son.
I know. You've heard about pastors' kids, right? Well, and so I'm like, Lord, this is, I can't do this. I must have misheard you. I can do something else. And I was actually considering a number of different options. And I called my dad, because I was kind of figuring, well, I want to get counsel, right? So I called my father, and I told him the scenario. And I said, Dad, I think I need to get out of the ministry. I think you were right, 10 years ago when you told me this was not going to be a good track. And he said to me, Pete, he said, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But you're a damn good preacher. Don't let one bad experience force you out of something that you love. And again, I thought it was one of those, defining moments where it was almost as God used my father of all things.
Who would have thought, right?
I know. And so I said, okay. And so then I actually looked for...
You're like, dude, that's not what I
know.
was expecting from you, right?
I was waiting for him to say,
talk
go
me
make
out
some
of
money.
this, right?
Use your MBA, for goodness sake. And actually, that was the turning point which got me to Woodcrest, which is where I ended up serving for 23 years. And so you have those little turning points in your life where you're like, wow, that, looking back now, that was such a critical moment. And I guess if I have anything to say, in terms of my own growth in that, was to recognize the truth in that statement when he said it.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And that's the thing. You meet with the unlikeliest of allies that helps you along this path. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Especially in this journey of purpose. The most unlikely people are often the people who back you up.
Yeah.
The people who say, hey, I've been watching you from a distance. You don't know me, I don't know you, but you keep going, And it's pretty incredible how that works. And who would have thought, right? So Can
I brag on you a little bit?
Oh gosh, no.
No, I'm serious, because it was another critical turning point. Yeah. So I'm leaving Woodcrest. I'd been there for 23 years. It was a rather uncomfortable departure. It wasn't as nice and neat as I would have liked. And so when you have these things that happen where you start to question yourself, even after you've done something for a while, you wonder, is it me? Am I doing something wrong? And in this instance, there were some things that I could have done differently and better. But when you and I met, one of the things that gave me was when you affirmed some things that said, and when you said, hey, Pete, I want to know you. I've seen just what you just said. I've seen you from a distance. I want to get to know you better. It was as though God was saying, look, I'm not done with you yet. There's some things that you still have to do. And that was another place where we're now doing this, and now I'm doing my voices from the villa, and
right,
I like that might never have happened if you didn't reach out at the time that you did to say, "Hey, Pete, I want to get to know you."
Yeah, I know. It's now like the Facebook Live interview celebrity. I mean, it's crazy though. It is so true. It's kind of like just getting that little nudge, where 2 seconds earlier something would have fallen on the ground, but just that little nudge gives you a springboard to go again and go higher, and just those little things as far as confidence. And talking about the Gospels, and Christ questioned his mission, right? Then he said, if it is your will, let this cup pass away from me.
Yeah.
Angels had Moses and all of these guys had to come comfort him. So, and I think that is a very important point.
Well, and if I can say something to your audience in that, don't underestimate those promptings. Like, I think we have promptings all the time about saying something positive to somebody or reaching out to somebody when you have a sense that, hey, maybe I can do something, or I can come alongside that person. They wouldn't be interested, or other. And who knows whether or not the word that you would have to offer, or putting your arm around that person's shoulder and saying, you know what, I think you got something to do. I like you. I think you have something to say, or whatever it is that you feel prompted to do. Pay attention to those, because they can be life altering. And I know we say that kind of stuff all that time, but it's so true.
Absolutely. No, I really don't think you should underestimate the importance of a kind word. It is obviously double-sided, so it comes back to you, but we often underestimate the power of very little things, right? Mm-hmm. So say, for instance, today I don't know if you saw that comment from that lady on Facebook. Today I post, not Facebook, Instagram. I posted a little, video thing that says, I don't know, don't lose faith or something. Mm-hmm. And there's this lady who commented and says, oh my God, you have no idea what this means to me.
Wow.
Right? And so she proceeded to say that as soon as she saw that, she thought and was reminded of her son named Nathan, who passed away.
Wow. Because
it was very funny, because on that post, normally on most of my posts, I'll have my first name, and my last name, right? Mm-hmm. But in this one, I went ahead and put my full name there, and then I deleted my last name. So it just said Nathan.
Wow.
Right? And so that really hit her as a unique message specifically for her.
Oh, that's great.
It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
And so these little things are things that a lot of times we underestimate, but like you said, it could change a person's life. So that's really, really, really good point. So let's get into like the core question. How would you, what does purpose mean to you?
Well, if I can tell another story.
Yeah.
About 10 years into my tenure at Woodcrest, the church was growing. I had never led anything as large as that at the time. And I felt very inadequate. And I didn't know what to do. And so I actually came to the board of our church and I said, I think I've taken the church as far as I can go under my leadership. And it might be better if you find somebody else to take it to the next step. And one of the board members who really believed in what I could do and believed that God had me here for a purpose said, well, what if we tried to help you build some confidence? Like, instead of replacing you, what if we make you better? And I went through a process with the folks that Stephen Covey and the management leadership coaching course that they offered. And one of the things they did is they said, Pete, what's your job? And I pulled out my resume. I showed them my job. And they said, well, if that was helpful, you wouldn't call us. What's your, like, why do you exist? And it's a rather long story, so I'll shorten it up a little bit. But through a series of circumstances that involve both some testing of my gifting, personality profile, things I had been affirmed about in the past, I went on a personal retreat after this whole process, and I said, God, what's my job? Which is essentially another way for me to say, Lord, what's my purpose? I mean, not my job in the sense of job description, but what is my role in this life, in this world? And I came to a conclusion, and I came to one sentence, and that is that my purpose, the reason I exist, is to be a highly effective communicator of God's truth, period. And what that did for me was it meant that I didn't have to be everything. So here I was in a growing church with a lot of people, and I thought I had to do all these things. You know, I had to be the manager, I had to be the encourager, I had to be the numbers person. And what I discovered in that process was, look, this is the assignment that you have. Fulfill that role, and then bring other people around you that can help you get the other parts of the job done. And it was, again, one of those little tweaks in the trajectory where when I came to some clarity about my purpose, it not only released me, but it released a whole bunch of other people, because I started saying, hey, what's your job? What's your job? What are you supposed to do? You get away with God. You look at your test scores. You look at your personality type, and you try and find this marrying of all those things so that it can be synergistic in your life and you can fulfill your purpose. And it was a tremendous run as a result.
That's wow, that's phenomenal. I mean, you're speaking my language entirely because, you know, it is true. And one of the points that I have in my purpose module in my course, and is purpose really, gosh, like everything you've said, it helps you eliminate they say that the sculpture reveals itself by chipping away the inessential, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's so beautiful because that purpose is basically the chisel with which you use to chip away the inessentials and reveal this thing that is beautiful and really just saves you time.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic, because I mean, I couldn't put it any better than that. Now, when, let's say, what do you say to a person who comes to you and says, Pastor Pete, I'm 30, I'm 40, I don't know what my purpose is? What would you say to that person?
Well, part of what I think it's hard sometimes, and this was helpful to me, so I'll just offer it. Sometimes it's harder to know what you are to do than it is to know what you're not supposed to do. So I'll ask the question, well, what do you hate? Like, what do you really don't like to do? What doesn't give you energy? What gives you gives you a headache when you think about doing it? And start saying, like, to use the analogy, chip away at that stuff that you don't want to do. Just lay that aside. And then what are you left with? I think that starts to give you a pretty good road to start on. And then I say experiment. So when you do some of the things within this lane, what excites you? What energizes you? Where do you get affirmed? What seems to fit your gifts and talents? And start putting some of those pieces together, and then try and articulate as much as you can. Like when I was talking about my one statement, I didn't start with the statement. I started with a paragraph, and I was challenged to go to, no, it's not clear enough. You're not going to remember that in a month. Get down to the core thing that if you don't do this, you won't feel alive. And so it is a process. I don't think anybody comes to it just like that. And I feel like in some ways, even in the religious environment, we haven't served people well, because they say, well, just go ahead and get along with God and God will speak to you. Yes, but it's more than that. Because it's not just like, you don't just hear it out of thin air. God is so wise in the way that he does this. He equips you for things, and he gives you experiences that are meant to shape you. So even the trash that I learned through the hard times my mom had was really important for me in terms of ministry. It created a sensitivity in me that helped me serve as a good pastor. So putting all of those things, your bad experiences, your good experiences, your personality profile, your gifts and talents, what energizes you, what you hate, what you think has to get solved. Putting all those things together, I think, is kind of where I would start with a person.
Yeah. I mean, I have nothing else to add to that, folks. This is it. Piet's your new host. But it also tells me why I like you so much. He's so eloquent. I was like, man, I didn't go to school to learn to be a communicator. What do I do? So here's another question though. Okay, Pastor Piet. I thought that my purpose was to do this or to do that. I thought my purpose was to raise my kids, but now I'm not so sure. Do you think a person's purpose changes, Pastor Piet?
I think it's refined. Like, I think you have to live a little bit too. So when I'm talking to, let's say, a 25-year-old who's just getting started in their journey, I say, you're not going to be clear on your purpose until you live a little bit. So you have to have some failures. You have to have like, oh, I thought it was this and I didn't do so well at it. Okay, that just gives you another thing that you're not supposed to do. Or maybe there's some lessons about the character development that happened in you while you were failing. One of the colleagues that I worked with at Woodcrest had a saying. He said, sometimes you're the curriculum. Like you think it's about what you're doing, but it's about you and who you're becoming. And so all of that, I think, has value as you move through life. And so you don't know enough when you're 25 about yourself and the world to be absolutely clear. So you start on a track, you live a little bit, you experiment, you get affirmation, you get correction, all of that. The thing that I look back on, and I know the feeling. When I was in that trailer court, I felt like an absolute failure. I wasn't a good husband. I wasn't a good pastor. I'd spent all this money on education. I was like, this is awful. And so I know the feeling of despair that can come at those points when you feel like you thought you knew and then you feel like you didn't. But if you can keep on trudging on, ask the right counsel from the right people. So calling my dad was a really good choice. So people who know you, people who love you, who want you to succeed, bring those people alongside you. That's why people call you. You're an advocate for that. Right. And you've had your own journey, which has allowed you to have insight into people and what they need. You faced your own battles. You can kind of draw from that experience. So it's not unusual for you to question your purpose as you go along.
Absolutely. I mean, I think even the very fact that a person is aware enough to question their purpose is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Because for some people, that idea of meaning and purpose, they're so deep in asleep that doesn't even come up on, in their consciousness. So if you're having that existential question pop up, then I would say you're in the right place. It means an answer is about to show up. It's kind of like a fever breaking, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a very good thing. So what is
and can I add to that? Yeah. Because one of the things that I want to talk about at some point with you, if it's here, maybe now, but at some point, is this thing about service and its connection to purpose. So when somebody's unclear about their purpose, one of the things I would encourage them to do is just start serving somewhere, like giving yourself away, because your purpose is not the end. It's a means to an end. So a purpose gives you direction. It's not the end in itself. But what purpose does is helps you to know where to serve. But if you don't have that service orientation as a foundation, you're going to find yourself discouraged and frustrated all along the way because purpose is not enough. It's not a good end. So the way I've heard this illustrated is like, what's a toaster for? A toaster makes toast so you can have breakfast. The end is not the toaster. The end is the breakfast that is served to people. And you can do this with like a shovel. I mean, everything has another purpose to serve someone. So even if you're not clear on your purpose, go ahead and start serving, because that's going to be the bedrock of what you're going to need when you discover your purpose.
Absolutely. I mean, even the very definition of purpose says the reason for which something is made, right? So the function that it was made for is really that end result, right? It's, a TV, it was maybe meant to entertain. These days anymore, it's bad news. But, and so you have to look at that function. And that's a very good point, because I recently had a young man said, you know what, I've been depressed for like 3 months. Broke up with a girlfriend of mine of years. I have no reason why I broke up with her. He was not fulfilled. He had a business that he started, was doing well, he shut everything down, sat at home, played video games, has no desire to do anything. And I asked him, I said, what, why? Just probing questions. What do you really want? Do you have any goals? And his goal was to, buy this new car that he saw. And, it was really all material things. Nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, what I told him was this: you need to go serve other people.
Yeah.
You need to start thinking, what can I do to benefit others? Go volunteer your time. Go do this, go do that. Get out of your head. Like, you're all about you, which is okay, but it cannot just be that, because that will never fulfill you. It doesn't matter what you do and what you have. And I think that is one piece of the puzzle that could get a lot of people unstuck in relation to the dissatisfaction they feel with the performance of, whatever job that they're in that they're not happy in right now.
Yeah, and I think part of what that experience, and as a coach and a pastor, you have an opportunity to speak into people's lives, and you might have to say the hard thing. So a person's done a business and given up on a relationship, and then they're in front of the TV playing video games all day long. That reveals something about the character of that individual. And that kind of character can't sustain the weight of significance. So even that experience can be really helpful, because if you're willing to be honest with yourself, to say, hey, this whole experience revealed something about me, that I may be easily discouraged, or I may be lazy, or I may not have enough courage to do the hard thing. And if you can own up to that in that place, it's like, okay, that was revealed. Now I'm going to put myself, like you said, in a position where I can start serving other people, get out of my head, and start saying, I want to build the character necessary to carry the weight of significance.
Right, absolutely. And the answer is always within you, because he was looking for, to be told something, this is what's wrong with you, or why he was this. I was like, you'll figure it out. I kind of gave him some hints, which was, you probably want to start thinking about what you need to do to help others, because he just didn't know what was going on. And I said, do you think you're depressed? He said, yeah, I think so. And I said, do you get up in the morning? Do you do this? I said, yep, you're not depressed. You just are without a real purpose. And finally, one day he sent me a message and he says, oh my God, I finally got over it, And I said, what changed? It was really changing his focus and also owning up to it. And ultimately, my whole point with that is this: he found that answer within himself.
And if I can interject here, part of what you're saying, I think, is a skill that people have to learn, which is, I am willing to pause long enough to figure out what's happening in me. So when you say the answer is within, part of how I hear you is, what a person has to do is get smart about themselves. Like, what motivates me? Why am I in this place? And most people don't pause life long enough to ask that significant question. And that may even be something that came out of this so-called, timeout or depressed moment, is that you just become more self-aware. because self-awareness is going to serve you so well throughout your life. And I think most of the mistakes I've made in my life, if I look back at it, is that I did not have enough self-awareness. I did not realize what was motivating me or inspiring certain negative behaviors that could have taken me out or was becoming a problem for my marriage or for other people. That as my self-awareness increased, I'm like, okay, I can own that. But my lack of self-awareness really hurt.
Right. Okay, so here's a question. Pastor Pete, I've been at this job for the last 15 years. I make good money. I am very unhappy. I've got a mortgage. Obviously, I've got 2 kids and my wife. But I'm very, very unhappy. What do I do? And I know it's not my purpose, Pastor Pete.
I want to be careful how to answer, because I feel like sometimes when we're in this business and we're like doing this podcast, we can throw out a couple things and say, "Oh, just do this, and you'll be fine."
Right.
So part of what I would say is that you are where you are partially because of attitude. So you just named off some things that you have going for you. You have a wife, you have kids, you're making money, you're having a contribution you're making to your society. Those are good things. Really good things. Do you know how many people would love to have that? So I would begin by saying, can you shift your attitude a little bit? And instead of looking at what you don't have, can you begin to celebrate what you do?
Yeah, of course, Pastor Pete. I mean, I do all the time. I'm very grateful. As a matter of fact, I like my job, but I am not in any way fulfilled by it. And, every single day that I work, and having worked that job for the last 15 years, I feel like I'm slowly dying inside just doing that. I mean, what do I do?
All right. So you are grateful for what you have. You're telling me you love your wife, your kids, you're engaged with them, but you still feel unfulfilled in your life as a whole.
Right.
So part of what I would do is I would look at the various, like if sometimes it's helpful to think of the image of dials on a dashboard. So when you're, driving a car, you're looking at the oil light, you're looking at the temperature gauge, you're looking at the speedometer, especially if a cop's nearby. And so you're looking at these gauges, right? And so I would just say, okay, so what are the gauges on the dashboard of your life? And so you say, well, you've talked about family, you've talked about job, you've talked about wealth. So you have some gauges that are kind of on the full side.
Right.
But are there other gauges that are blinking a little red light? So what are the other dynamics of your life? Where are you spiritually? Where are you intellectually? Where are you in terms of service? Are there some things that you're not attending to on the dashboard of your car that could add the meaning that you're looking for? So I would ask them that question. So if we're just a hypothetical conversation, let's pretend you're that person. So when you look at the dashboard of your car, are there any areas of your life that you are not attending to?
I mean, I just feel like it's probably doing this job that is like killing me. If there's a gauge, that's the one that's broken.
And what is it about the job?
It does not, I feel like I could do more with my life. I feel like I could offer more service or maybe do something that speaks to my soul even better. Like this doesn't really do anything for me. I know how to do it. I make money, but, I'm 45 now and I feel, is this really it?
Okay. So I would say when you look out at the world and you see the needs of the world, is there anything that really goes to the core of what you care about where you say that should be fixed? Is there anything that kind of fits that category for you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. One or two things I can think of, yeah.
So what if you did a small thing in regard to that problem?
I mean, I figured that, yeah, it could be a good place to start.
Okay. Why don't you try something, and we'll have another podcast next week, and we'll see how you're doing.
Good. It's worth exploring. All right. Excellent. And I mean, you handled that very well, but it was just really dealing with that question because, again, on this topic of purpose, there are a lot of people that work jobs that they absolutely dislike, but do not even know where to begin, right? They have things that they have built a life around that they feel responsible for. Hence, it could be an excuse, it could be real, but hence those things appear to keep them dependent on that job or a situation that they don't really like. So that's kind of where I was going with that question. And
I think one of the things that happens when you get older, I'm getting older. Did you notice?
Really?
A couple gray hairs.
Look at the hair, man.
A couple gray hairs. 61 next month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know.
What?
I know.
You're rocking it.
One of the things that happens is that you're like, when you go to college and that you hear the typical graduation speech that goes like, the whole world is before you. You can do anything you want. You have this image of what that should be. Like, I'm going to do this great thing. And what you end up doing is you discount some of the quote unquote normal things of life, like getting a job, having a home, raising your kids. And all of that, all of a sudden, as the older you get, the more significant those simple things feel like. Because in having a house, I protected my family under a roof, which is really nice in these days. And I live in Iowa, and let me tell you, it's nice to have a roof over your head. Right? So you're like, that's not as small a thing as I thought. And now I'm watching my kids, they're all adult kids, and I'm watching them take on challenges, and they're applying some of the lessons I taught them. And you realize, wow, raising those kids was a really important thing. And then if I could put a little money aside, I'm starting to think about like, well, what could I do with that? What kind of legacy could I leave? So all these things that I would, okay, so I'm making some money. I got a house. I'm raising kids. What's that? It's like not enough. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Don't discount those things so quickly. Okay, so you don't have some fulfillment. You know what? We're in a broken world with broken people and broken dreams. That's just how life is. So, yeah, do I look at my life now and go, wow, it wasn't everything I thought it would be? Yep. And I don't know a person who doesn't have that as a response. But I did some things right. And those things that I got right really mattered.
But then, though, going back to the whole topic of service, would not service make it better? Because, frankly, if you're not feeling fulfilled, it means you're not being used to the fullest extent. So all you need to do, like you said earlier, is look around you. There's enough problems to fix.
Yeah.
Right? And when you can pour your energy and desire and passion into something, all of a sudden you have this life that means something,
Right.
And even if you work a job that you're not fully satisfied with, you can at least be passionate about something until you figure out what to do with this thing.
Yeah, and I think that you have to ask the question, like, why does this little thing over here bug me so much? Like, it doesn't seem to bug other people, but it's bugging me. And so I heard one of the ways that was described is to say sometimes God gives us a holy discontent. Like there's something in the world that's broken. And the reason that I have a burden about it is because I'm supposed to do something about it. And so when a person starts serving, for example, we've all heard stories about somebody who starts serving in a food bank, and then all of a sudden they have a passion for trying to help people who don't have a square meal every day. And they're like, I got to do something about that. And they start investing in themselves and their resources. And it's like, I feel so fulfilled that I found this thing. I can't fix everything, but I can fix this little thing. And that feels great.
Right. It's always great for a person to pour their energies into others. And that's just where satisfaction from life comes from. It's not from earning a living. it's from serving others. So in closing, because we can talk about this and like this forever, and
I love it.
that.
I do love it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you for being here. What is Piet's philosophy to life? If Piet was dying today and needed to leave some parting words to your kids, you're all gathered around your bed, or heck, let's not even say kids, because you have a special thing for them. Just you meet a stranger. This is going to be the last time you're going to see the stranger, and you're about to depart this realm. What is that advice you would give them? After that, then, if that's different from your philosophy to life, please indulge us.
Wow. It's a great question, and I'm not sure I've figured it all out yet. But I think the thing that I would say now is you are way more important than you think. That your decisions and your life and what you choose to do with it matters a lot. We just got done this past weekend. We did an event at the church for the young people in our church, and we had a couple of speakers that talked about suicide and depression and things like that. And I had a couple conversations with young people during the afterglow, if you will, and I was surprised at how many people don't feel like their life matters. And maybe it's because, you go to a school and it's kind of like the machine that's churning out people, and you kind of live with all these expectations that other people have for you, and you never feel like you're big enough or important enough. And so you start feeling like, you know what, I don't really matter. And you wonder why these kids take their lives. And I think at some level it's because they don't understand their own unique value as a person. So I would try to lock eyes with them and I would try and say, dude, you matter a lot, more than you ever thought you did.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I mean, how's that for parting words? Those were really good. Those were really, really good. And it is so true, because as soon as you realize your real worth, you act and you behave in a different way. You just don't waste your life, do you? You know, if you know you're valuable, you don't waste and throw away something that is valuable.
Absolutely.
That's phenomenal. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're gonna end it here today. You've been listening to Nathan and the coolest preacher on the block, Mr. Piet Van Ward. And Piet, so are you on social media?
I am. You can find me on Instagram, Piet Van Ward, also on Facebook, and then I have a web page, pietvanward.com. So yeah, you can find me in all those places.
Phenomenal. This dude is a celebrity. You said you had the Dutch consular was coming by your.
Yeah. So we have this villa, and because it's such a historic space, people from all over the world have become familiar with it, and that's not an exaggeration. So there's a big tulip festival at the beginning of May, and the Dutch consulate has never been to Pella. And so he's coming this May, and we're going to be hosting him at the villa.
So cool.
So
cool.
Yeah.
So maybe a year after you do your voices from the villa, we could maybe have another podcast to talk about the people that
wouldn't
came
that be fun?
through and the lessons learned. Maybe you teach us some things about communication there. Again, folks, thank you for hanging out with us, and thank you for listening. This has been the Addicted to Purpose podcast with Nathan, and again with Piet Van Ward on this episode. I hope you join us again, and of course find us on social media. The recording of this podcast will be found on YouTube and pretty much every podcast platform out there: Spotify, Apple Play, and SoundCloud, etc., etc. Feel free to leave a comment after listening. Let us know what you'd like to listen to. Let us know what you enjoyed most about this podcast. And of course, I'd be generous enough to pass that along to Piet. Thank you again. No matter what, be the best you can be. Bye.
Bye.